March 20th, 2003, 5:34 a.m., Baghdad. The pre-dawn silence of the Iraqi capital is not broken by a scream, but by a low-frequency hum. Suddenly, the horizon tears open. Tomahawk cruise missiles, launched from the Persian Gulf, streak across the sky like vengeful ghosts. Inside, the most hunted man on earth, Saddam Hussein, is believed to be sleeping. The earth heaves. Concrete vaporizes in the Pentagon bunkers. The world's most sophisticated military machine holds its breath. This is shock and awe, a gamble so massive it will redraw the maps of the world. General Tommy Franks watches monitors. If this strike kills Saddam, the war ends. If it misses, the US has kicked a hornet's nest that will burn for decades. The dust clears. The regime lives. Can a superpower export democracy at the tip of a bayonet? The Iraq War, the war that changed the Middle East forever. By the dawn of the 21st century, the global order sat on a razor's edge. The United States was reeling from the trauma of September 11th. The American psyche shifted to a preemptive posture. In Washington, neoconservatives viewed Iraq as the centerpiece of a stagnant, dangerous Middle East. Iraq possessed the world's fourth-largest army, but sanctions and no-fly zones hollowed it out. Yet, the ghost of Saddam Hussein remained an irritant. Flawed intelligence suggested Saddam hid WMDs. The 1% doctrine took hold. If there was a 1% chance of threat, it was treated as certainty. Economically, stakes were astronomical. Iraq sat atop vast oil reserves. Destabilize Iraq meant to destabilize global energy market. Regime change was the clear choice. To understand the Iraq War, one must understand the two titans locked in a lethal embrace. President George W. Bush, the decider, viewed the world in moral absolutes. For him, Saddam was evil, defying UN resolutions and using chemical weapons. On the other side stood Saddam Hussein, a master of survival. He ruled Iraq through tribal loyalty, brutal secret police, and a cult of personality. His psychology was rooted in the Stalinist model. Saddam's greatest flaw was his own hubris. He believed Americans were soft, unable to stomach a high body count. He played a dangerous game of strategic ambiguity, pretending to have WMDs to scare off Iran, while knowing he had none to defend himself against the US. It was a fatal miscalculation. One man thought he was saving the world. The other thought he was too big to fail. The invasion of Iraq, codenamed Operation Iraqi Freedom, was a masterpiece of logistics and a nightmare of diplomacy. While France and Germany balked, the United States forged a coalition of the willing, spearheaded by the United Kingdom's Tony Blair. The geography of Iraq presented a unique challenge: flat plains, rugged mountains, and the Sunni triangle with Baghdad. The American strategy, designed by Rumsfeld and Franks, was light and fast. The ground invasion would begin almost simultaneously with the air campaign. The U.S. 3rd Infantry Division and the 1st Marine Expeditionary Force were the tip of the spear. Their objective, a lightning dash 300 miles north to Baghdad. They would bypass major cities, leaving stay-behind forces to deal with the Fedayeen Saddam paramilitaries. It was a high-risk maneuver. The deception was equally vital. The U.S. positioned massive forces in the south to draw Saddam's attention, while special forces squeezed from the north. Saddam's generals were blinded, their radar was jammed, phone lines cut, and command structures decapitated. March 20th, 2003, H-hour. The crossing of the Berm from Kuwait into Iraq was a scene of industrial-scale violence. Thousands of M1A1 Abrams tanks and Bradley fighting vehicles tore through the desert, kicking up plumes of sand that choked the sky. By hour 12, the 7th Cavalry was engaged in a fierce firefight at Nasiriyah. Here, the plan hit its first snag. The Fedayeen Saddam area fighters in civilian clothes did not fight like a traditional army. They utilized technicals and RPGs, launching suicidal ambushes. The sandstorm of the century hit on day 4, grounding helicopters and turning the battlefield into a surreal, orange-tinted void. Visibility dropped to zero. Satellite GPS became the only eyes the Americans had. Despite the weather, the American Iron Fist did not stop. At the Battle of Objective Peach, U.S. forces secured a vital bridge over the Euphrates. The Iraqi Republican Guard attempted a counterattack. It was a slaughter. The Iraqis moved in the dark, unaware that American thermal optics could see them from miles away. T-72 tanks were popped like tin cans. By April 5th, the thunder runs began. Cole David Perkins led a column of tanks directly into the heart of Baghdad. It was a psychological sucker punch. The Iraqi information minister, Baghdad Bob, was telling reporters there were no Americans in the city while U.S. tanks were visible in the background. On April 9th, the world watched as the massive statue of Saddam in Firdos Square was toppled. The regime had collapsed in just 21 days. It was a tactical triumph unparalleled in modern history, but the victory was a mirage. The immediate aftershock of the fall of Baghdad was not the birth of democracy, but the birth of chaos. The Coalition Provisional Authority issued Order No. 1 and Order No. 2, total deboathification and disbandment of the Iraqi army. In a single stroke, 400,000 armed Iraqi men were sent home without pay, without a future, and with their pride shattered. They didn't go home to farm. They went home to plan an insurgency. The casualties of the initial invasion were relatively low for the Americans. For the Iraqis, the numbers were in the thousands. But the economic damage was total. Looting stripped the city of everything from gold faucets to copper wiring. The power grid failed. The water stopped running. The liberators were suddenly viewed as occupiers. The geopolitical fallout was immediate. Iran, Iraq's bitter rival, realized their greatest enemy had been removed by their other greatest enemy. The Shiite crescent began to glow. Syria became a pipeline for foreign jihadists. The war had opened a vacuum, and nature and radicalism abhors a vacuum. If there is a single moment that defines the tragedy of the Iraq War, it is the critical mistake of intelligence and post-war planning. The assumption that the Iraqi people would greet the coalition with sweets and flowers led to a catastrophic lack of troop levels for the occupation. The US entered a country of 25 million people with fewer than 150,000 troops. To maintain order, experts suggested 500,000 were needed. This hubris allowed the insurgency to take root in the Sunni triangle. The failure to find WMDs stripped the mission of its moral authority. The leadership flaw was a refusal to adapt to the changing nature of the war. For 2 years, the Pentagon insisted the insurgency was just dead-enders. By the time they realized it was a full-scale civil war and sectarian cleansing, the country was a charnel house. The legacy of 2003 is written in the headlines of today. The Iraq War gave birth to Al-Qaeda in Iraq, which eventually morphed into ISIS. It shifted the balance of power in the Middle East toward Tehran, creating the modern Cold War between Saudi Arabia and Iran. Technologically, the war was a catalyst for the drone age and the integration of digital battlefield management. It proved that while you can destroy an army with technology, you cannot govern a culture with it. The American public's appetite for forever wars vanished in the dust of Anbar province. The skepticism that defines modern American foreign policy was forged in Baghdad. It remains a haunting reminder that in the theater of war, the easiest part is the invasion. The hardest part is the day after. As the sun sets over the Tigris today, the shadows of 2003 still stretch long and dark across the desert. We are told that history is written by the victors, but in Iraq, the ink was replaced by blood, and the final chapter has yet to be closed. The ghosts of the fallen, from the soldiers of the 3rd Infantry to the civilians of Fallujah, whisper a single, chilling truth. Some doors, once kicked open, can never be shut again.